Welcome to Executives at the Edge, a podcast brought to you by MEF. I'm your host, Pascal Menezes. Join me as we explore thought-provoking perspectives from the leaders and changemakers who are propelling enterprise digital transformation forward. Well, I'm really super excited to have Roy Chua. He's the founder and principal analyst for AvidThink. And today we're going to cover some really amazing topics around what the enterprise are looking for in network as a service from the carriers. How do we see the ecosystem of NaaS come about? What's the role of the middle mile player? And really, at the end of the day, what's the big takeaway of our biggest conference coming up the year, our global NaaS event? So with that, Roy, welcome to Executives at the Edge. And if you can just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and your company, that'd be really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, Pascal. Always a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you for having me on. So AvidThink is a research advisory firm covering what we call infrastructure technologies. A lot of that overlaps with what the telcos do and what the cloud hyperscalers do as well. And so that's a space that we tend to play in. And we're always interested in the next generation of infrastructure, and a lot of it has to do with what's happening with networking, and nowadays, I guess, AI workloads can't avoid them.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Roy, again, it's such a great having you on this episode. And one of the things that we want to talk about is there's this concept of a middle mile.
Yeah.
And maybe for our listeners, what is a middle mile? I mean, I know what it is, but I think for our listeners, it'd be really helpful. And there's a lot of change happening from this idea of going to this business network through a middle mile to get to clouds and so on. Can you help us understand what's going on and what the changes are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to understand the middle mile, we have to put it in the context of the first mile and the last mile, because it's the middle of something, right? And so very quickly, the first mile usually is sort of backbone infrastructure that's connecting sort of large regional data centers by the web-based businesses, hyperscalers. So imagine the hyperscalers, data center operators, and some of the largest carriers. The last mile, I think most of us understand, right? That's the access layer. That's the wireline, wireless infrastructure, provides connectivity to users, both business and consumers. And that's, from the points of presence that are sort of in the metro areas to your homes, to your offices. And that includes things like wireless or, point-to-point, and in some cases, satellite even, not just your 5G wireless, right? So that's the first mile, the last mile. The middle mile is interesting. So the middle mile is that part that's in the middle. And if you look at the definition, and a lot of governments sort of define that as, traditionally we look at the middle mile as leased dark fiber, inter-office transport, backhaul that the carriers use, some of the carrier-neutral internet exchange facilities, and then carrier-neutral submarine landing stations. So that sort of that piece that connects the first to the last is that messy middle part of it. Right, that's sort of the middle mile. Also includes things like radio tower access, what infrastructure that connects your radio towers. It could be microwave links, right? And that's sort of the concept of a middle mile. And that's the part that's a little bit less locked down, right? Your last mile infrastructure generally is from a point of presence to your homes, your offices. That's pretty, sort of, I wouldn't say static, but sort of locked in. Your first mile is between sort of large infrastructure like your data centers and like. The middle mile is this very interesting, what I think of increasingly as a Goldilocks zone that has that flexibility that you kind of need, but also the capacity that I think increasingly will be important. And I think we'll talk about some of those new workloads that require that flexibility there.
So I actually think of the middle mile a little different. Maybe the way I think about it is the middle mile has come in through some of these big software-defined cloud interconnects, where, the Equinix Megaports, Console Connects, where in the past we've had this idea that we'd had private networks and they would connect to all your sites and to all your locations and data centers. And then I also think about the internet showed up, and so I can get to all the clouds now through the internet. But now I think the middle mile players, like what I mentioned, they connect to all various cloud types. And, instead of going through the internet for some workloads that are fine, but mission critical workloads go through this kind of on-ramps to the clouds through this middle mile. Is that an awesome middle mile?
No, that's correct. I mean, I think what you're pointing to is, as I said, the carrier-neutral internet exchange facilities, right? Some of the Equinixes, your Digital Realties, your Megaports that run those facilities actually do belong in the middle mile, that sort of by definition. And increasingly, these infrastructure endpoints, with these colos, they give you that flexible on-demand type stuff. That's part of the middle mile. And so that whole focus of the whole SD-WAN movement that we saw sort of the last 10 years, right? A lot of that machination happens within the middle mile architecture itself. So that's correct. I think that part definitely will align. And that's where a lot of the exciting things are happening, right? That the concept of NaaS, right? Network as a service, a lot of those services, in fact, impact the middle mile, right? How do you get from your office to, say, GCP in a convenient way? How do you get from your warehouse to AWS, a region in a convenient way? And as you say, not through the internet per se, but I have a lot of traffic I want to push through, or I need that kind of privacy or guaranteed level of service. The middle mile connectors are what enable that.
So what are you hearing about? Are there any changes in that in the last 12 months?
I think there are. So what we've seen, what we've heard in the conversations with some of the minimal operators and the enterprises and the hyperscalers. So traditionally, the workloads we saw prior to the last 12 months were sort of work from home, 5G backhaul, and communications, media type stuff. The last 12 months, a new workload has come up, so to speak, and it has to do with AI related. So not always just pure, generative AI, but sort of predictive AI as well. And so there's increasing data sets that the enterprises want to move around, either between clouds, into private clouds, or into some of these new style GPU as a service providers as well, right? So your CoreWeaves and your Lambda and so on. And so there's now increasing desire to create connectivity, sort of on demand, right, between these different places so that they can move either training data sets or models that are, pre-trained ready into locations, for the inferencing steps. And so we're seeing this new workload become an interesting part, and it's no longer just about hyperscale data centers, sort of your regional data centers. It's also about other data centers as well, not just the GPU as a service, but other private data centers where they're hosting new computing, private computing. And so that flexibility, that requirement to create these links between new places where you have compute availability, I think that's come up a lot in the last 12 months. And what our conversations have pointed to as well is there's a lot of new data centers being built. And they go sort of where the cheap power is. And when those things come up, well, you got to connect those as well. And so increasing flexibility across more locations to move data around, potentially for AI or Gen AI, and to the extent that that curve continues, that Gen AI continues to scale, then we'll see that become a larger and larger part of the workloads.
That's very fascinating. So I think I've been talking about the same thing, exactly that AI models will have to live now at the edges, and those edges now are owned by telcos with their GPU as a service. So even with their white boxes, you have GPUs. So that's kind of, and very small, so that you can have very small models, but good for inference for very small things like manufacturing, looking for just specific things for defects and so on. But let's talk about network as a service. MEF has really pioneered network as a service the last couple of years. Our big event is G&E Global NaaS event in 2024 in Dallas. And also, what do you think enterprises are doing NaaS, for their carrier services? Do enterprises understand what they want from their networks and the capabilities that can exist from NaaS?
So we've talked to some enterprises, and I think and we've been talking to them for quite a few years, and we've been talking to the carriers and working with the carriers for many years. And I think this concept of NaaS, I think historically has been a little amorphous, right? So they say, yeah, we want on demand, and we're like, okay, what do you want in your on demand services? And sometimes they can't exactly tell, nor can they tell you the business model they want it in. I mean, this was a couple of years back. And in fact, some of the carriers that we were working with that had sort of launched their own NaaS at that point, network as a service, they came out and realized that the enterprises weren't ready to consume them. They didn't have the APIs ready. They didn't know how to call into the, and automate all those things. And so in some cases, in the early cases, the enterprises weren't even ready for those. But I think increasingly what I'm seeing is that I think the enterprises are getting better about automation, about APIs, about programmable links, programmable infrastructure. And as that happens, I think they're more ready to consume NaaS, through APIs from the carrier. So I think that's coming up. But I think what's lacking is a standardized way of talking about it. I mean, you ask, say 3 years ago or 4 years ago, even you ask the carriers, what NaaS do you have? And you have all sorts of different flavors, right? There's so many different combinations that you could come up with. And I think what I think needs to happen is some level of standardization in standardized offers that we can at least get our hands around, that the enterprises can say, oh yeah, NaaS of this flavor, A of flavor B or flavor C. I think that's important. I think that's part of why we're supportive of the work that the MEF is doing around trying to at least have a consistent way of talking about it, a standardized way of defining the services. And I think just looking back at what the MEF did with Carrier Ethernet, and that was obviously clearly successful. Now, obviously, you were looking sort of backwards, right? So, but I think sort of similar efforts, I think, are necessary to enable NaaS services so the enterprises know what they're asking for, what they're going to get, and the carriers know how to build and bill, the end customers for those things.
No, actually, you very, very good points. And I don't know if you're familiar, but we did release in April of 2024 our enterprise-facing APIs.
Yeah,
so all of the business APIs are being released, and all the operational APIs, so business meaning quote, order, billing,
yes,
and then all the operational from performance fault, service testing to trouble ticketing, all of that is now released to the enterprise as standard APIs.
Yeah,
and that's for NaaS.
Yes.
And we actually have services of Carrier Ethernet, IP services. We're now adding in all the SD-WAN, overlay, SASE, cloud ramps, all being loaded on those enterprise-facing APIs. So that's good to hear that you're validating what we've done was the right thing.
Yeah, and I did see that. Yes, and I think it's a good step, right? I think I wrote in a blog post recently around, the MEF vision for NaaS is pretty big, but the key obviously is to make it step by step, right? So that you make it so that the enterprises can consume each step of the way. So you can boil the ocean, but you boil it one pot at a time, right? So that's what I said. But
for us, actually, it was lucky that we had spent, since having the CTO 8 years and building all of these assets anyways, we didn't know what to call it. And then one day we woke up and we saw the NaaS market appearing. Not that it wasn't around, it's been on for a decade plus, but all of a sudden it changed to this pure on-demand connectivity kind of model to on-demand connectivity, overlay, cybersecurity added into it, and cloud on-ramps and multi-clouds. So when we realized that, we said, well, hang on, haven't we been building that for like 8 years? Isn't that, and all the automation APIs, so isn't that NaaS? And that's how we repackaged everything. So the good news is we've been doing this for a long time, and we just repackaged all of our assets under the NaaS umbrella. And it so happens that now the market's taking off. And you did mention commercial models. I do think it's going to be a challenge of how you switch from how the cloud guys did it, where you have perpetual licensing to these subscriptions or pay-as-you-go or monthly subscription cancel anytime. Meanwhile, you have to amortize all of these assets over multiple years and not showing where your contracts sit. So to me, that's a very big challenge. But I do want to talk about, and you'll see now, we're introducing our incident maintenance API on one of these enterprise, and soon our cybersecurity alert API and so on, all coming from the enterprise customers. So thank you. That validates everything we've been thinking, saying, doing, and our enterprise leadership council has been saying the same thing. So that's really good. But how are you seeing now this whole ecosystem evolve around NaaS? From the wide area network, who are the main players? How do you see their positions? You also have campus NaaS. You have also I'm going to say that the campus NaaS and the wide area NaaS and all of this NaaS is all have to glue together.
I think there are many players, and again, I think the sort of the NaaS which overlaps a lot of let's leave the carrier NaaS. Let's talk about carrier NaaS fundamentally. A lot of that happens to be in the sort of the middle mile ecosystem, right? And that's the part that I think, and the players there, obviously the carriers are part of it, the hyperscalers are part of it, the sort of the colos, right? Your Equinixes of the world and so on are part of it. And I think, I'm not sure where the satellite players will come in or if they come in at that part, but I mean, certainly the last mile and the sort of but the middle mile, we'll see the evolution of that at some point as well. I think those are the players that eventually sort of will play in that. I think the interesting part for me is, and I'll be very interested in seeing this, when we get to, the global NaaS event, right, Jeannie, in 2 weeks, actually, when we see that, I'd be interested in the interface layers when we start marching up, right, from just a sort of the WAN interface or WAN links or things that are more akin to a carrier Ethernet type point-to-point connection, as we move up the stack to add the SD-WAN capabilities and the cybersecurity capabilities. I'm going to be very interested in how the stack grows up, because that could introduce new players into the ecosystem as well. Not just the infrastructure owners and the fiber owners or the fiber operators and the like, but the next layer up as well. And that's going to be interesting for me in terms of how that evolves. But to date, a lot of the conversations I've had are, again, the carriers, no surprise. The inter-exchange carriers, the colo guys, no surprise. The data center operators, again, some of the tower owners, right? So those are the typical people that we have conversations with around the middle mile and the NaaS as it comes to that middle mile, right? But as we move up the stack, SD-WAN players, the MSPs, maybe they have some interest in playing around that area as well, and how they consume the APIs. Maybe they can bring in other innovations. That's the part I'd be really interested in. I'm actually looking forward to the Enterprise Leadership Council as well, and seeing what their thoughts are, because I think it's important to look at it from the enterprise point of view, because those are the consumers of these APIs, or at least one of the major consumers of these APIs, and understanding what they want, what they're ready to consume, when. I think that's going to be very, very interesting.
No, all very, very good points. And I do want to say that we have been thinking about this NaaS more than just underlays. And we have actually released already all of our automation capabilities for, obviously, underlays, carrier Ethernet, on-demand connectivity, we call it. We've done it for IP services. Now we're adding wavelengths in because of AI training. And that's coming out very shortly in our payloads. We call it payloads on top of these APIs. And we've also released SD-WAN services, payloads coming out also. We're working on SASE payloads also for the overlays. And we already released into our LSO marketplace some cloud payloads like GCP. So we actually see this, all of these, what we call payloads on top of our APIs, business and operational APIs. We already see this now coming to fruition. In fact, we have a project called the Payload Factories that are just building up payloads for all of these use cases. And so it's very, very critical to our success that we deliver on this. And we've actually can build up payloads within 2 weeks now. So it's amazing, once you have these APIs out, how you can add into these APIs what we call payloads, which are representing all these services. And so it's really, really outstanding. And I know you released in AvidThink the Campus NaaS. Any thoughts about how Campus NaaS will play into this?
Yeah, so I think, what we see on the campus side is enterprises, at least a good number of them have indicated a desire to purchase their infrastructure in a subscription manner, kind of like the cloud, right? So they view Ethernet and Wi-Fi connectivity not necessarily as differentiation to their businesses, right? And so they're like, hey, can I just pay someone a monthly fee and make this go away, right? Even the last mile access, they're looking at to have it subscribe as a service because they like the cloud so much. And so we're seeing some of these players, right? And you have them, and some of them have relationships with the MEF. In fact, some of them have been on your podcast as well, right? So you have folks from NAL and Meter and so on, and Join and the like, and they all have these NaaS services for the campus. And the large players, your Cisco's, your HP, Aruba, Juniper, have also started down that path. So I think what I see on the campus side is that NaaS will become an increasingly popular option for a lot of, especially medium enterprises and small enterprises, and eventually maybe it'll eat up there. But they don't want the hassle of managing that infrastructure, and they want the flexibility, and they want someone to manage it. So I think the campus NaaS value proposition is slightly different from the carrier NaaS proposition. The campus NaaS proposition, a lot of it has to do with I don't want to mess with dealing with IT and all these operation stuff, and I don't want to acquire all this equipment and have to do with installation. I want someone to deal with the problem for me. So that's a sort of a business proposition and OpEx value proposition primarily. The carrier NaaS what I'm seeing, or at least what I'm hearing in the early days from the enterprises, is for them is a flexibility element, right? In other words, I need connectivity between point A, point B, point C for the different workloads that I want to run on top of that. And the flexibility between the different clouds, different data centers is what I'm paying for that on-demand nature. I don't want to lock down a 3-year contract, right? For this, this MPLS part. I want this on-demand nature because guess what? I'm going to go where let's just use AI for the moment. I want to go where the GPU is available, or want to go where power or GPU is the cheapest for the time being. I need a level of flexibility. And so the driving factor to me, at least value proposition in terms of what I'm hearing from enterprises, is they value the flexibility, the on-demand nature of the carrier NaaS, right, as opposed to some of the other elements. So it's slightly different in terms of the value proposition, but both are elements of the network as a service and network on demand, right? But it's sort of driven by different things, is what I'm seeing.
No, your points are really well taken. And for example, a multinational might say, look, I'm going to operate my own private SASE all over the world, and I need connectivity to all these data centers where my private SASE is running.
Right.
But a smaller enterprise, medium size, might go, though I don't really want to manage cybersecurity. You do a SASE cloud, Mr. Carrier NaaS.
Yeah, Mr. Carrier NaaS. Yeah, just
right.
Mr. NaaS, do it for me, right? Whether it's pick your favorite, networking vendor, or it could be your carrier offering a campus NaaS or an end-to-end, right, network service. I want the problem to go away, right? That's not my problem. I want to focus on running my business. The networking stuff, someone needs to deal with, because again, I don't see a differentiation, or at least they don't see a different business differentiation, and running better Wi-Fi, right? Maybe it is, but they don't see it, right? It's like, okay, Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi, right? Switching is switching, right? That's someone else can take care of that. And so I'm seeing that, and it makes sense, right? I mean, even at home, right? I mean, we think about it. Do you really? Well, I mean, if your carrier came in and said, just put these things in, and your app will tell you where to put these things up, and you turn it on, and we'll manage it and run it for you. And if something goes wrong, we'll tell you, and we'll swap it out for you. You'd be like, not bad. Why should I? Some people like doing it, but I'm like, I don't really want to deal with where I put my Wi-Fi APs and everything in the house. I just want it to just work because I got other things I want to deal with or I have to deal with, right? So I think, I mean, again, it's just like we don't rack and stack servers anymore, go to the computer room and deal with raised floors and cooling and all that. I mean, companies don't deal with that anymore, right? You just take a credit card, you swipe it, and you go on the cloud, right? You like GCP or Azure or Google or CoreWeave, right? It's done. I mean, we don't think like that anymore. So I think the network will have elements of that, and it's happening already.
Yeah, and I also think that what we've been doing also is we see the idea that co-locating through clouds, for example, co-locating meaning that I want to connect to a certain cloud, but the cloud's not an IaaS cloud or a PaaS cloud. It could be a SASE cloud, as I talked about. Yeah. It could be an AI cloud, cloud that someone else is operating, and then now there's opportunity for all these guys to say, okay, I can connect to all that, but I can also say, I can offer you that as a channel. I'll offer it to the customers, the enterprise. I'll manage it, run it. Yet it's not run by the provider. It's run by a partner that's built the AI model.
Yep.
And then they want to deploy it on their service provider edges, including right to the building edge.
Absolutely.
So all of these are all possible. To do that, you need automation APIs. And that's why MEF has spent 8 years and $1 million of development in making sure, and massive adoption now of these APIs, and have this flexibility. Their APIs and these schemas of different service types can all come together. And, it's a massive complexity problem to solve day one, but 8 years later, when you've done it, shipped it, now you see the power of these Lego block building ideas where you can now connect horizontally, vertically, in all various ways. And as you said, maybe a multinational says, I just want underlays, I'm doing the rest. And maybe a smaller enterprise says, just take care of everything. Yeah. Underlays, overlays, cybersecurity, connect to all my clouds. I can't deal with it. You deal with it. So I think there's so much flexibility in NaaS in our blueprint that allows many, many use cases of how anybody wants to consume NaaS. So thank you for validating all of that. I really appreciate that, Roy. And so what do you think about, what are you looking for MEF-GNE? What are you looking to achieve there, and what do you hope to take away from that event?
Yeah, so I think, on my side, it's always good to connect with the folks, all the different members at MEF and just get an idea from the carriers. And a lot of them are very forward-thinking carriers in terms of what they're seeing, right? What's driving them? How is AI? I want to have an ongoing conversation, right? Because AI is changing, and I want to ask them, how are AI workloads really changing? And then I've been talking to them actually a couple of weeks at different conferences and asking everyone, right? Is it impacting you? Is it really impacting you, right? Where do you see it going? And so I think, those things certainly I want to ask. And obviously we're not going to forget about the UCaaS workloads, the AR, VR, type workloads. I mean, all those still exist and are still important, right? So I think those conversations in terms of workloads. And the other one I'm looking forward to for this particular GNE is we're giving the enterprise a lot more voice through the Enterprise Leadership Council. And I want to hear from them and talk to them and just get an idea, because they are, at the end of the day, I mean, they're the consumers. And I think it's important to broaden the MEF ecosystem. And you guys are doing a good job in doing that. I'd like to hear from them in terms of what they're looking for, and are they getting what they're getting from the carriers or not? And if not, right, what's the gap? That's the part I'm looking forward to hearing.
Well, look forward to having you there, Roy. And I hope you get all your goals and outcomes met. I'm sure that you will, because we have some stellar speakers, stellar lineups, incredible board, technology advisory boards, CEO advisory boards, you name it. All the leaders in the industry are going to be there. So looking forward to also being there. So thank you,
likewise. No, thank you, Pascal. I'll see you there as always. So looking forward to it very much.
Thanks for joining us for Executives at the Edge. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe today. Share online and review. Find all our episodes on your favorite podcast platform and at MEF.net.